love living up here. This is such a great place.
Yeah, it's great.
I love telling people about what a great place to live it is. When they hear it gets to be 45 below in the winter, they just
Who was Mr. Nagley?
Do what?
Who was Mr. Nagley?
He was an entrepreneur that came up here and started our first grocery store. And it was originally called Nagley's, then it was bought out by somebody else, and it was called the B&K.
Okay.
And when I moved here, it had just stopped being called the B&K, so all the people that I know from back in the day still call it the B&K.
Okay.
But then Dennis Freeman, who bought it, changed the name back to Nagley's because that was the historical name of it.
That made sense.
And that's one of the oldest buildings in town.
Uh-huh.
It's time to see the mountain, and all the best is between like the end of May and the beginning of July. For the last 5 years, it has started raining on the 4th of July, and it has not quit raining until it snowed.
Oh my.
And actually, we're right here, we're looking at 14. Here's where the restrooms are, here's where the ranger station is at the end of this road here. And all of this.
That's interesting. Very famous bush pilot and the first guy to ascend Mount McKinley, or whatever. Jeanette.
Right, Jeanette.
2:30.
Okay, good.
Come here. That looks nice.
Going up or coming down, you brought out with you.
The letters correspond.
Buckskin
I get cold just looking at it.
Look for root.
Station. So you guys can probably tell from the theme of this museum that the thing that Talkeetna is really known for is being the place to come if you actually want to climb the mountain. So that's the reason why we have a ranger station here. We process all the climber permits. We deal with search and rescue on the mountain and basically do everything climbing related for Denali. So our climbing season actually is over for this year. It ended about a month ago, and our climbing season is pretty short. It's just from the end of April till about mid-July, because this is typically when we see the best weather for climbing. This is also when we got our mountaineering rangers who are actually stationed on the mountain. So obviously people like to go up when they're there, because it makes things a bit safer. Usually during the climbing season, we get about 1,200 climbers come through our station. So we are dealing with a lot of people. And about 90% of our climbers choose to do the West Buttress route, which is this route right here. And for you guys who can see in that corner, it's the green dotted line in front of you. So the reason why most people go for this route is because it's the fastest, easiest one up the mountain. Though it's not all that easy and it's not all that fast. This is still going to take you 2 to 3 weeks to do, depending on conditions. So this is a time commitment. However, if you guys have been in the park already, you might have heard that this year is the 100th anniversary of the first successful climb. They did not take this route, however. They took a route on the opposite side of the mountain, right here across the Muldrow Glacier on the blue line. Now this route can take up to 2 months, depending on conditions, which is the reason why no one really does this one anymore. But this year we did have a group who were recreating the historic climb, so they did this route in June. However, they were basically the only ones who went on the Muldrow this year. So usually people will just stick to this route. Now, the West Buttress route is really not all that technically challenging to climb, but the reason why usually only half of our climbers reach the summit is because Denali is a very cold, very unpredictable mountain. Just out of curiosity, what is the coldest temperature that you guys have ever felt?
Minus 56.
Minus 50.
Can anyone beat minus 56? I think we might have a winner over here. You would do fine on Denali, but some of you guys might be a bit cold. The average temperature on our summit during the summer is about -20.
Oof.
Now this is the average, of course, so that means that when climbers are up here at high camp, they have to prepare for the chance of it being -50 degrees. Winds can get up to 100 miles per hour, so it's going to be a little bit colder feeling than -50. So definitely a lot of preparation is needed for this mountain. So I'm assuming that you guys are not actually interested in climbing this thing since you're here after the climbing season has ended. But let's just assume for a second that you guys are very experienced mountaineers and you've all decided that climbing Denali is going to be your next life challenge. So what are all you guys going to have to do before you get to the mountain? First thing, of course, is you got to train and you got to prepare. So what climbers will do is get together with some other climbers to form climbing teams. Usually people go up in groups of 5 to 6. So they'll get together with their friends and begin to train. We recommend that people get as much experience climbing above 14,000 feet as possible. And we also recommend that you get experience climbing on glaciers, because part of this route is across the Talkeetna Glacier here, and that definitely requires a different set of skills than climbing on a mountain. Now, once climbers have physically prepared, they need to have all the right gear. So I have some of it in front of me here to show you guys. First thing that everybody's got to have is a lot of rope, because everybody in the 5 to 6 person climbing group is attached to each other by the waist. Reason why this is important is because as you're making your way across the Talkeetna, there are going to be crevasses everywhere. And these are very deep cracks in the ice that are not always that visible, which is a bad thing because they can be as deep as a 40-story building. So that's why the rope is so important. If someone in your group happens to fall into a crevasse, hopefully that rope will save them and you'll be able to pull them out again. So, I'm just going to pass out a picture of what these crevasses look like. The man in the picture is practicing rescuing himself out of a crevasse. He didn't actually fall in, so don't worry.
How far apart do they rope themselves?
Usually there's about 1 meter or 2 of rope in between each
A
other.
meter or two.
Yeah. So as people are making their way across the Talkeetna, trying to avoid all these crevasses, most people are skiing or snowshoeing this area because typically there's a couple feet of new fallen snow down there. So what people will bring is this spurring. It just attaches to the bottom of your skis. Kind of feels like velvet, so it just gives you some more traction when you're going up the slopes. So just let you guys get a feel of that. But once people get higher up on the mountain, it's just ice up here. So, since ice tends to be slippery, that's when people switch over to the crampons. So these attach to the bottom of your boots. They're very spiky, so they just give you some better grip when you're on the ice. If you happen to start to fall down the slope, this is when your ice axe is going to come in handy. If someone starts to fall, what they're going to do is put one hand on top of the ice axe, push the blunt end into your shoulder, and then you try to fall directly on top of the axe. Hopefully then your body weight will push this serrated edge into the snow, and you'll be able to catch on to something to break your fall. You have to do this very quickly though, because usually you only have a couple seconds to save yourself.
Don't get it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So, once people get up here past high camp, between high camp and the peak, there's about 800 feet of fixed line. So climbers will bring carabiners in order to strap themselves in, and it just makes the climb a little bit easier once you're in the higher elevations. However, this year we had an extremely warm summer, which you can't tell right now, but during June it was very, very hot. One day it was the highest recorded temperature in Talkeetna ever. Got up to 97 degrees. So that was very unusual. It was really hot down here, but it was also very hot on the mountain. So as a result, this season people were saying that they could hear running water under the ice around the fixed lines. So people were kind of avoiding them this year, but typically most people will strap themselves in. So here's a picture of what these fixed lines look like that I was just talking about. Now when people are climbing Denali, usually they have at least 100 pounds of gear with them. Now this is a lot of stuff, and obviously they don't want to carry that much weight up the entire mountain if they don't have to. So, system that's worked out is as they're making their way up, they store things that they're going to need for their descent as they go, just to unload some weight. And in order to find your stuff again, you bring about 30 of these wands. So on here has got the team leader, permit number, and return date, so you can figure out whose stuff is whose. But we also have to tell climbers, you need to bury your stuff at least 3 feet in the snow. Reason for this is because we have a little animal up there that's discovered that these wands tell them where to find snacks. This animal can also imitate the sounds of 70 other different animals, and some researchers think that they're smarter than chimpanzees. Does anyone have an idea of what they are?
Humans.
Nope, nope. Any other guesses? What'd you say?
Magpie is a bird.
Close. It's a raven, actually.
Oh, yeah.
So you might have seen ravens flying around Talkeetna.
Yes, we have.
They're also up on the mountain, and there's nothing else to eat up there except for your food. So they will try very hard to get at it, so it's important to bury your stuff deep enough. So I can imagine it'd be very disappointing to come down the mountain and discover you don't have any more food.
Never mind.
Now the last thing that I got here that climbers bring is the clean mountain can. For the 2 to 3 weeks that they're doing this route, this is their bathroom. Everything's pack in, pack out on the mountain because we want to keep it as clean as possible. So how this works is you take your clean mountain can up, and there are crevasses marked along the route for clean mountain can contents. So once yours is filled, just take out the biodegradable bag, throw it in a crevasse, and then once you finish your climb, you return the can to the ranger station and we take care of it.
So you throw it down the crevasse?
Yeah.
Really? Huh.
The exception to this is when you're up at high camp, because it's so cold that it will just stay there forever. So you do have to take your stuff down. Also, you're not allowed to throw it in the crevasse when you're at base camp because there are just so many people there, it'd be ridiculous. So you have to fly that stuff out with you to Talkeetna. So that's how that system works. Usually I don't go into that much detail.
So it's not a beer cooler. That's not a beer cooler.
Not a beer cooler.
No, definitely not. Yeah, someone asked me if that was for food one time, I was like, no.
How many rescues do you have to do a year with those 1,200 climbers?
Sorry, what was your question?
How many rescues per year would you have to do with 1,200 climbers?
Well, this year it was really low since we had that great weather. It was only 5 rescues, but usually it's around 15. So we do use our search and rescue helicopter pretty frequently.
How much does it cost to rescue a person?
I'm not sure of total cost. I know that our pilot Andy told me one time that having the helicopter fly for an hour costs about $1,000. And that's just, doing routine drop-offs. I don't know if it's more if you have to, rescue somebody.
Does a rescue mean saving 1 or 2 people or bring the whole 5 or 6 party down?
We just rescue the one person who's not doing well.
That's what it's about.
So we're not going to take everybody.
No,
up.
okay.
Nobody gets a free ride. We want you to come down on your own unless you are really doing poorly up there.
Do you have to pay to do this? Is
To
there a
climb the
cheapest-
mountain?
Annual fee.
Yeah. So permit fee is $350 to do this mountain, which is pretty cheap compared to other summits.
Per person.
Per person, yeah. It's a bit cheaper if you're, I want to say 24, 25 or younger. It's at $200 then.
Have you gone up the mountain yourself?
I haven't had a chance to yet because this is my first season at this park. Before I was working at some state beaches in Southern California. So this is different, but hopefully within a couple years I'll be experienced enough to do this. Definitely need to work my way up to it. Most people who do this route do it when they're in their mid to late 30s, because that's usually how much time it takes to get enough money to do this and enough experience. And I'm only 22, so I got plenty of time to work my way up there.
Takes none to talk about it though. Huh? I'm not being disrespectful, but it takes none to talk about it.
Well,
Do you have to pay for your own rescue?
all search and rescue on federal public land is paid for by tax dollars. So this includes, climbing Denali, but it also includes, if your 5-year-old wanders away from a campground in Yosemite, just all of that is covered by tax dollars. So, once climbers are physically prepared and they got all the right gear, the next thing they have to do is register 2 months in advance before they do their climb with the Talkeetna Ranger Station. They have to pay that permit fee of $350 and they have to submit a resume of their climbing experience so we can see what routes they've done before and see if they're actually prepared to do this type of mountain. Now, once climbers actually arrive in Alaska, they have to attend a 2-hour orientation with the Talkeetna Ranger Station. So this is when they get the clean mountain can, they get the stickers for the wands, but it's also when we show them pictures of the entire route, talk about any new conditions that we've seen up there, and we have them spread out all of their gear so we can see what they're planning on bringing and making sure that everything is in good enough condition. Of course, last thing we ask during the orientation is what color is your tent and what time do you think you'll be back? Because if people do not come back to the Talkeetna Ranger Station at a time that we think they should be off the mountain, that might mean we need to send out the search and rescue helicopter to go find them. And like I said before, we do have to do that every single season, unfortunately. But what I'm going to do with you guys now is play a little game where we're going to pretend like you guys are 2 groups of climbers who are making your way up Denali. So let's put you guys about here, and we'll have team number 1 and team number 2. Now, like real climbers, first thing you got to do is fly from Talkeetna into base camp. So what climbers will do is they'll hire planes over the Talkeetna airstrip to fly them directly onto the Talkeetna Glacier at 7,000 feet, and then they begin their climb there. So, how this game's gonna work is I'm gonna pass out one of these bags. Just pick one card out of the bag and read it out loud, and you'll see what happens to your team. So, team number 1 is now gonna try to fly into base camp, so let's see what happens there.
You don't get to look and choose, huh?
No, you can't look first.
This is the element of surprise.
Yeah, just like the real
Just
climb.
pick one of them? Yeah, just pull out one.
Okay, well, I kind of, why don't you do it, you read them.
There you go. Talkeetna to base camp. You make it to 6,000 feet on the Talkeetna Glacier, but fog forces the pilot to turn the plane around and fly back to Talkeetna. After another 2 days, you finally make it to base camp.
All right, so we followed the Talkeetna hang. People are stuck here for a few days, just waiting for the weather to clear up before they start their climb. Not unusual at all. So let's see if team number 2 has to do the hang as well.
Oh, that's, I pull from here.
Yeah.
Your air taxi is ready, the weather is clear, and you make it safely to base camp.
All right. So team number 2 did not have to do the hang, and all you guys have made it to base camp. So I'm just gonna pass out 2 pictures of what it actually looks like up there. So when climbers fly in, they check in with our base camp manager, so we know that their group has arrived on the mountain. And then from there, they start to make their way across the Talkeetna. So you guys are gonna be heading up to Ski Hill now. You can tell that it's really not that big of an elevation gain because you're just going across the glacier. But you're definitely gonna have to deal with those crevasses that I was talking about before. So let's see how team number 1 does.
You choose to haul your gear up in the heat of the day. The heat and your sudden exposure to high elevation leave you dehydrated and dizzy, and you faint by your tent.
Sounds good for us.
Sounds good. Alright. So team number 1 is definitely going to need some time to recover from that.
Yeah.
But the reason why they fainted is because they were trying to make their way across the Talkeetna right in the middle of the day. Now we tell climbers it makes a lot more sense to climb the lower elevations in late afternoon or actually during night. Reason for this is because when you're on the Talkeetna, you're basically in a valley of white. Everything's covered in snow, so the sun is reflecting off every surface, and it's very easy to get dehydrated and very easy to get sunburned, as team number 1 has now discovered. But hopefully team number 2 does a bit better as they make their way across the Talkeetna.
Oh, boy.
Is there no crevasse danger at night?
Right. Well, it's not actually dark at
Oh.
nighttime during the summer.
Gotcha, okay.
Your skin is red with embarrassment and sunburn.
All right, so you guys did the same thing.
Uh-oh.
Did we faint?
But you didn't faint.
It just says I traveled during the day.
So you guys did faint, but you're still sunburned.
Sunburn.
All right. So, just gonna pass out a picture of what climbers look like when they're making their way across the Talkeetna. Like I said before, they have about 100 pounds of gear with them. So most climbers will start out with a little plastic sled where they'll load up about 60 pounds and then put 40 pounds on their back. So it just distributes the weight a little bit. You can also tell that most of the climbers have their entire bodies covered to prevent from that sunburn. And they're also wearing snow goggles to prevent from sun blindness. So you guys are going to be making your way up to Motorcycle Hill now, gaining a bit of elevation. So let me get somebody from team number 1 to read this.
It's time for a change of luck.
Get it right now.
Okay. You camp a safe distance from an ice fall. A tremor during the night doesn't wake you, but the thundering crash of ice does. You're scared silly by the sound, but otherwise you are okay. Hey, we made it. Finally.
Alright, so earthquakes are very common in this area. Usually we get about 3,000 earthquakes a year within the park boundaries. Most of those are really small, like 0.5, so you can't even feel them, but it's still a very active area. So climbers have to be aware that there is the potential danger of a rock fall or an avalanche caused by an earthquake, which team number 1 has now experienced.
But they survived.
But they survived.
We lived
They
it.
managed to keep going.
Keep going.
So let's see how team number 2 does.
Okay, you haul some of your supplies up to Motorcycle Hill and then return to Ski Hill to camp.
More permanent than the ones that people have who are climbing, because all the stuff for the mountaineers is airlifted to these camps. So they also have a lot better food than climbers because they don't have to worry about weight. So they get, you know, frozen pot stickers and salmon burgers and stuff.
Somebody up with it.
Yeah, become friends with the rangers. That's a good survival skill. All right, so team number 1.
I don't like this one. On the climb from Windy Corner to Basin Camp, you realize you have more fuel than you need. You try to give it away to other expeditions, but no one takes it. In order to lighten your load, you decide to throw it in a crevasse. A ranger sees this and you are fined for illegal littering.
Team number 1.
Bad, bad, bad.
Not
I think we paid attention during orientation.
They'll never be invited back.
bad. Seriously. So the mountaineering rangers are not just up there for medical reasons. They're also patrolling, making sure that people follow the rules, like packing out all of your trash. Team number 1 decided to be sneaky though and try to unload some of their extra weight in a crevasse. So ranger caught them doing that.
How much was the fine?
I'll take,
This is ours.
I'll take that one. And then here's the new one.
So that's yours.
How much is the fine?
It depends on how much garbage we're talking about. If
Okay.
it's just a little bit of litter, it's a couple $100. But we had one case a couple years ago where a climbing group left one of those black garbage bags with like a bunch of garbage on top of the garbage bag. But they were nice enough to leave us a Walmart receipt with their name on them. So we were able to find them again. And in that case, since it was so much trash, it's like considered defacing federal lands. So in that case, that's a couple $1,000, and if you're found guilty, you're not allowed within a national park for 3 years. So that one's pretty hefty.
Is that per person or the team?
Yeah.
Fine.
I'm sure it was for the team because it's kind of a group responsibility there.
Sure.
All right, team number 2.
You cross a narrow snow bridge as you travel past Windy Corner. Suddenly your sled falls into a crevasse on one side of the snow bridge. As your sled dangles there, tugging you toward the abyss, you hope that nothing falls out of the sled. And at the end was black, expecting you to be charged by the ranger. Luckily, you recover your sled and make it safely to base camp. Basement camp. You're exhausted and looking forward to a few days rest.
All right. So you guys had a close call there, but managed to get yourself out of the crevasse and keep going. So, just going to pass out a picture of what Basin Camp looks like. The 2 tents in the picture are the medical tents that we set up there. But you guys are going to be heading up to your last camp now, which is High Camp. This is also the last spot on the mountain where we have the Mountaineering Ranger Station. Since they've been on the mountain for a few weeks, by the time they get up to High Camp, they're very used to the altitude when they're stationed here. And if the weather is decent enough, they're cross-country skiing around, patrolling, making sure that everyone's doing all right. So, let's see how team number 1 does, 17,000 feet.
A lot of this stuff sounds like very poor judgment.
Well, the bad thing about this game is it makes it sound like everybody's falling into crevasses left and right and everything's going wrong all at once. Basically, we just want you, like when you're playing this game, to realize the potential dangers of the mountain.
Right.
But
I mean,
you know,
ignoring advice again, leaving your litter up there when you've been told, and it should be obvious, it's not some, I mean,
all these things that are coming up are things that do potentially happen, but the majority of climbers who do this route are very, very experienced and they follow the rules and they don't get hurt. That's the typical one, but that'd be a very boring game. So we have to have everything go wrong, so.
What's the percentage that actually finishes the climb?
That make it to the summit?
Yeah.
Most years, only about half of climbers make it, and this is mostly because, they'll be climbing the mountain, and then at some point, a huge storm will come in. So they'll be stuck on their tent for days and days, and eventually they realize that they don't have enough supplies to keep going up, and they just need to start descending. So it's not because they're inexperienced or anything like that.
So if they could arrange an airlift of food, they could keep going.
The other way.
They could, however, most of Denali is in designated wilderness area, which means that you can't drive a vehicle or fly over it. The exception is our search and rescue helicopter because, that's important, saving people. So basically base camp is where it is because the wilderness area line is like right here. So that's like as far as the planes can take people.
But the mountain rangers get their food flown in, right?
They're the exception because
Yeah,
they're there
they
for
work
safety
there.
reasons. So we do make exceptions, but we're not gonna,
Right.
let some rich guy have his plane on.
That's not what Donald Trump says. That's not what Donald Trump says.
Well, I doubt he would find this. All right.
So basin camp to high camp. Today the temperature drops to -40 with hazardous high winds. You begin to question whether or not your expedition is prepared for these conditions. Should I read the rest?
Yeah.
Were you asked whether to stop and rewarm your hands at Windy Corner?
You guys were not asked, so now I'll just read the no part of the card.
Okay. You decide to persevere, knowing you've brought the right gear for the conditions. Your expedition revives itself with rest, warm fluids, and a hot meal.
All right, so team number 1 is doing pretty good at 17,000 feet, and you guys are gonna try your summit push tomorrow. So.
Really, they don't rest a couple days after that?
Well, that card said that they're doing good,
Okay.
so they're gonna keep going. It's really individually how people are doing.
Okay, basin camp to high camp. Lucky you, the weather has been great. Your team has climbed safely and gradually, and you enjoy a rest day at high camp where it's sunny and clear and a beautiful 10 below zero. Your summit pack is loaded and you are ready for the final push tomorrow.
All right, so it sounds like both you guys are ready. So what you're gonna do is leave most of your stuff set up at high camp, and then climbers will leave with just a pack of emergency essentials. So they'll bring with them emergency shelter, sleeping bag, sleeping pad, food, all this just in case they get caught in bad weather while they're out there. So the route to the peak and back takes about 8 to 12 hours. So technically it's a day hike, but it's a very intense one because there's only about half as much oxygen in the air at the summit as there is at sea level. So it's very tiring. And I always get asked, after climbing for 2 to 3 weeks to get to the top, how much time are you actually at the summit? Answer is 20 minutes to half an hour. So it's a lot of work for a very small window where you're at the top of North America. But what climbers will do is if they do make it to the top, they'll bring with them their summit flag. So all of these flags on the ceiling right here are flags that were designed by climbing groups and they bring with them. And so if they make it to the summit, they'll hold it up for their picture, and then sometimes they let us keep them. So this is just a very small section with what we've got in our collection. But now that you guys have all made it to high camp, let's see if you guys are able to bring your summit flag up to the top.
Does the whole team get to the top normally?
Normally it's everybody or nobody, because it's mostly weather conditions. Occasionally we'll get like one person in a group who's got high altitude sickness, so sometimes they'll decide to just leave that guy at a camp and try to keep going.
Okay.
So if you get up there and it's not that, there's a lot of clouds and stuff like that, would you come back down to high camp and do it again so you can have a great view, or just, you did all that work and you got to see a bunch of clouds?
I mean, I'm sure that just depends on conditions and whether you actually have enough supplies to do something like that. I don't think most people do that.
It's the thrill, it's the thrill of, it's
You were the first person to ask me that.
I'm sure they've seen a lot of these along the way.
Yeah.
Well, I've got the news, guys. It's bad news.
Uh-oh.
For 3 days, we're forced to stay at high camp by hazardous high winds above. We're forced to descend without climbing.
Well, we've gained experience and it should be a shoe-in next time.
People make it to the summit, and it wasn't because you guys didn't put in enough effort, it's just because the weather on Denali was not cooperating with you. So let's see if team number 2 is a bit more successful.
Let's do it.
Bring us home.
Does the average climber lose weight on this trip? What's the average weight loss? Do you know? Anybody know?
I'm not sure about average weight loss. It kind of depends on the person.
But
I
do
know
they-
for our mountaineering rangers, like most of them, like do not have any fat on their bodies, so
No.
they look pretty much the same when they come back. But one of our mountaineering rangers is a bigger guy, and it's pretty noticeable when he gets off the mountain. So it really just depends on your body. And I don't ask them how much they weigh, so I don't know how much that is.
I just thought it was a statistic they may have collected, that's all.
Yeah, but you can tell with one of the guys.
You're tapping in.
The storm moves in and keeps you in your tent for several days. Did you lose some of your food cash to ravens at Motorcycle Hill?
Yeah, you did. So just read the yes part.
You were forced to descend during a break in weather and do not summit.
See you guys at the bar.